always thought Thanksgiving was supposed to feel warm laughter, family, and the smell of roasted turkey filling the house. But in my family, Thanksgiving had always been more about performance than love. My name is Lauren Hartley, and that night changed everything. We were at my parents' place, a big colonial house in the suburbs that still smelled like the candles my mom collected from the fancy gift shop downtown. The table was full, my brother Ethan, his wife Amber, my parents, and my little girl Emma. Emma was the light of my life, 11 years old, smart, sensitive, the kind of kid who apologizes to her toys when she accidentally steps on them. I had worked 2 jobs just to make sure she had a normal life, one as a teacher's aide at the local school, and another shift at a diner 3 nights a week. We'd barely settled at the table when the usual started. "So, Ethan," Dad said proudly, "how's that new SUV treating you? Heard you upgraded to the hybrid model." Ethan grinned, cutting his turkey like he owned the world. "It's great, Dad. Smooth drive. Kids love it." Mom leaned over with her smile. "You deserve it, sweetheart. You've got responsibilities, a family, a mortgage. We're just proud you're managing so well." And then came the silence, the kind that leaves only one person out. Me. I forced a smile, stabbing my mashed potatoes. No one asked how my daughter's asthma was. No one asked how I was managing after my landlord raised the rent. And then, just when I was swallowing the lump in my throat, it happened. Emma reached for her glass of juice, her small fingers trembling. "Mom," she said weakly. Her voice sounded far away. Then her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed. Everything blurred, plates shattering, Amber gasping, my chair toppling. I rushed to her, screaming her name. "Emma, sweetheart, open your eyes." Her body was limp, cold. I could barely hear myself over the pounding in my ears. "Call 911. I shouted. Dad stood frozen for a second before muttering, "She's probably fine, Lauren. Sit her up." I looked up at him, my voice breaking. "She's not breathing right." The paramedics arrived minutes later, but it felt like hours. They asked questions, blood sugar, medical history, medications. When they lifted her onto the stretcher, I followed, numb and shaking. At the hospital, under the harsh fluorescent lights, the doctor said words I'll never forget. "Your daughter is severely hypoglycemic. Has she been eating properly?" I swallowed hard. I try. I mean, yes, as well as I can. The doctor looked at me not unkindly, but with a trace of concern that stung. Kids at this age need balanced nutrition. Stress, skipped meals, it adds up. Stress, skipped meals, the things I couldn't always fix. Hours later, when Emma finally stabilized, I sat beside her bed holding her hand. I hadn't realized how small her fingers were until that moment. That's when my parents walked in. Mom was carrying coffee. Dad had his phone out, texting someone. Mom smiled faintly. "How is she?" "She'll be okay." I whispered. Dad sighed, like it was all a minor inconvenience. "You need to watch her sugar levels, Lauren. Kids can be dramatic sometimes." I looked at him, exhausted. "She fainted, Dad. Dramatic isn't the word." He shrugged, turning to Mom. "We'll talk about it later." Then Mom said something that made the air freeze. "By the way, honey, is the $3.38 allowance enough for Emma's care?" I blinked. "What allowance?" Mom frowned, like she thought I was joking. "The one your father sends you, every month, for Emma." I felt everything inside me go cold. "There's no allowance," I said slowly. She looked confused. "He told me he's been sending $3.8 since last year." I turned to Dad. "Where's the money?" He avoided my eyes. "Dad." I said louder, "Where's the money?" He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Lauren, don't start." "Start what?" "The truth." Mom looked between us, her eyes wide. "John." Dad finally said it, flat and unapologetic. "I've been sending it to Ethan. He has a mortgage and 2 kids. He needs it more than you do." For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. "You've been giving my brother almost $4,000 every month." I whispered, "While I'm working double shifts just to pay rent, while Emma's skipping meals." He didn't flinch. "Ethan has responsibilities." I laughed bitterly. "And I don't. What do you call raising a child alone?" "Lauren." Mom said softly, "Let's not argue here." But I couldn't stop. The words poured out like acid. "I thought you were helping me. All those times you told me not to worry, that you'd support Emma. You let me believe that while you were handing it to him," Dad's expression hardened, "you could have asked if you needed more money. I did ask. You told me to budget better." The silence afterward was so sharp it hurt. Mom's voice broke the stillness. "You told me that was for Emma's care, John. You lied to me, too." He didn't answer. And in that heavy, sterile hospital room, something in me broke not just anger, but disappointment that felt like it could tear my chest open. When they left that night, I sat beside Emma's bed, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's got you now." But inside, a new fire had started. I wasn't just going to forgive and forget this time. When we returned home from the hospital that night, Emma was asleep in the back seat, her small chest rising and falling with the rhythm that made me thank every god I didn't believe in. The drive was quiet, except for the sound of my heartbeat thudding against the steering wheel. The streetlights blurred into streaks of gold, and white as my mind played the same words again and again. "He has a mortgage and 2 kids." My father's voice echoed in my head like a hammer against glass. I parked outside our apartment, the small, peeling brick building that always smelled like rain, soaked concrete, and just sat there for a moment, watching my daughter breathe. She deserved better than this, better than broken promises, better than fake grandparents who saw her as less. I carried her upstairs, laid her gently in bed, and stared at her for a long time. Then I sat at the table, pulled out my old laptop, and began digging. If my father had been sending money every month, $3,800, as my mother said, there had to be a trail, bank transfers, statements, something. I logged into my online banking account. I barely touched the emergency savings he'd helped me set up 2 years ago. But the numbers didn't lie. No deposits, none. Every month that I'd assumed he was sending support. There had been nothing, so where did it go? I opened a new browser tab and typed in the name of the family's financial advisor, Carlson & West Accounting, the same firm my father bragged about using. I remembered the login info he once gave me to access shared family statements. He'd forgotten to revoke it after my divorce. My hands shook as I typed in the credentials. The screen blinked, then opened. There it was, monthly transfers, $3,800 to an account under E. Hartley, Ethan. It went back 14 months, over $53,000 total. My throat tightened, and then something even worse caught my eye notes attached to each transfer. Mortgage support, car insurance adjustment, kids' education stipend, all of it labeled as Emma's medical support fund. My own daughter's name used as a cover story for their deceit. I pushed the laptop away, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd faint. For years they had pitied me to my face, pretended to help, while behind my back they were funneling money to Ethan and lying straight to my mother's face. That night I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark, watching the city lights flicker through the blinds, and made a decision. If money was all they cared about, then money was exactly what I would use to show them who I really was. The next morning I called my mom. "Mom, can we talk privately?" There was a pause on the line. "Of course, honey, what's wrong? Can you come by the apartment tonight, just you?" Her voice softened. "Lauren, is it about Emma?" "Yes." I lied. "And about Dad." When she arrived that evening, she looked tired, like she'd aged years in a single night. She sat down, eyes searching mine. I didn't waste time. I turned the laptop toward her and clicked the folder marked transfers. Her face drained of color. "These are the payments you thought Dad was sending to me," I said quietly. "Turns out they went to Ethan instead." She stared at the screen, her mouth trembling. He told me. "I know what he told you." She scrolled through the records, her hand covering her mouth. "He used Emma's name." "Yes," my voice cracked. "He used your granddaughter's name to justify giving your son thousands every month while I was choosing between her medicine and groceries." Mom leaned back, eyes glistening. "I didn't know, Lauren. I swear I didn't." "I believe you," I said softly. "But I need you to understand this ends now." She nodded slowly, the shock turning into something else. Guilt, then anger. "I'll talk to him," she said, her voice shaking. "He can't get away with this." I didn't stop her. Let her believe it would just be a talk, because I had other plans. 2 days later, Dad invited the whole family for dinner and make up Thanksgiving. He called it. He said it like he was doing me a favor. Ethan would be there, Amber, their kids. Mom said she'd go to keep the peace. I didn't tell her my plan, not yet. When we arrived, the table looked picture. Perfect again, golden turkey, candles, laughter that felt rehearsed. Ethan was already pouring himself wine. He smirked when he saw me. "Hey sis, no hard feelings about last week, right? You know Dad's just trying to help everyone." I smiled thinly, of course. Helping everyone's what he does best. Mom sat quietly at the other end, eyes darting between us. She knew something was coming. Dad carved the turkey, looking smug as ever. "Lauren, I was thinking maybe next month we'll reassess your situation. You've been managing okay, haven't you?" I leaned back, pretending to consider it. "Actually, I wanted to talk about that." The room fell silent. Even Amber stopped scrolling on her phone. "I wanted to thank you," I said, voice calm, "for the $1.53 too. 100 you sent Ethan last year. It really showed me where I stand in this family." Ethan's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Mom looked down, biting her lip. Dad's knife clinked against the plate. "Lauren, that's private. It was supposed to be for Emma." I interrupted, my voice rising. "You let me work myself sick while lying to both of us." Ethan chuckled nervously. "Come on, don't make it a big deal. You know Dad I know exactly what he did." I snapped, "And so do you." Then I pulled out my phone and tapped play. The recording of my earlier conversation with Mom played on the table, her confirming that Dad admitted everything. Dad's face turned red. "You recorded that?" "Yeah," I said quietly, just in case. For the first time in my life, he looked speechless. "I'm not here to fight." I continued. "I just came to say thank you for making everything so clear." I stood up. "You always said family was about responsibility, right? Well, I'm finally taking mine." Before he could speak, I dropped an envelope on the table. Inside was a folder of bank screenshots, printouts of every transfer, and a copy of a legal notice. Ethan grabbed it first, his face paling as he flipped through the pages. "What is this?" "A report." I said, smiling faintly, to the IRS. "Turns out, labeling false medical support payments is considered financial fraud. You should really check your inbox," Mom gasped. Dad's jaw clenched. Ethan stammered, "You wouldn't?" "I already did." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom looked at me, eyes wide with both horror and relief. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. "Her retaliation," I said softly, more to myself than anyone else. "That's what this is. Years of humiliation, and now it's my turn." I walked out before anyone could stop me. Outside, the night air felt different, clean, almost electric. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was reclaiming. As I drove home to Emma, I checked the rearview mirror and whispered, "We're done letting them decide what we deserve." The morning light felt different that day. Not the usual cold gray that settled over the apartment, but a kind of quiet promise, as if the world itself was waiting. I woke to Emma's soft breathing, still curled under the blanket, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in months' hope. I had spent the night reviewing every transfer, every screenshot, every email, every little note that proved what they had done. Dad, Mom, Ethan, they had all underestimated me. They thought I would cry, scream, beg. They thought I would silently endure their favoritism and manipulation. But I wasn't that woman anymore. By mid-morning, I had printed copies of every document, neat, precise, undeniable. The kind that leaves no room for excuses, no room for lies. I organized them in an envelope, planning exactly when and how to use them. Timing, I knew, would make the difference. A confrontation without strategy was just shouting into the void. I spent the day with Emma, making pancakes and playing her favorite board games. She didn't know the storm I was preparing. She only knew laughter, warmth, and the mother who had been too tired to fight before but was no longer. And that was how it had to be. I would fight for her quietly, decisively. Evening came, and with it the pretense. I invited the entire family for dinner under the guise of making amends for the Thanksgiving chaos. Mom arrived first, carrying a pie and a forced smile, her eyes betraying unease. Dad walked in a few minutes later, casual, arrogant, still believing he was in control. Ethan and Amber followed, grinning as if everything was fine, as if nothing had changed. I greeted them all with a smile that was calm, almost serene. "I thought we could have a proper family dinner tonight," I said. My voice carried over the clatter of plates and glasses, polite yet firm. Dinner began, but it was a different kind of silence this time. I let them settle, let them think I was just a quiet observer until the moment was right. I waited for the pause in conversation, that perfect lull where everyone's attention subtly shifted. Then I spoke. Before we start, I'd like to share something important with you all. Heads turned, Dad raised an eyebrow, Ethan smirked. Amber's fingers hovered nervously over her wine glass. Mom's expression tightened. She could feel, even before I spoke, that the air had shifted. I placed the envelope in the center of the table. Inside this folder are copies of all financial transfers Dad made over the past 14 months. Every single transaction that was meant to support Emma, my daughter, but was instead redirected to Ethan's account for his mortgage. Mom gasped, hands trembling. Lauren, I held up a hand. Please, just let me finish. I explained calmly, step by step, the scheme, the misdirection, the labels, the deceit. I spoke slowly, measured, letting the facts sink in. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I let the weight of truth do the work. Dad shifted in his seat, color draining from his face. Ethan's smirk faltered. Amber's hand flew to her mouth. Mom's eyes filled with tears, part shock, part horror. I continued. For months, I trusted you, Dad. I followed every instruction, managed every bill, kept Emma healthy and happy, all while believing that you were supporting us. Meanwhile, you sent nearly $54,000 to my brother, while telling my mother it was for Emma. That is not guidance. That is manipulation. That is betrayal. The room was silent, the kind of silence that hums in your chest. No one spoke. I let them sit with it. Every face in that room showed a different shade of realization, guilt, panic, disbelief. I walked slowly around the table, meeting each pair of eyes. I'm not here to destroy anyone. I said softly, I'm here to reclaim what was ours. Emma's medical trust will be funded, fully and properly, starting today. Every cent you withheld, every excuse you made will be corrected, and I have all the documentation to ensure that it is. Dad's voice finally broke, quiet, almost pleading. Lauren, you can't. I can. I interrupted. I already have. I turned to Mom. I know this is hard. I know it hurts. But you need to understand this isn't revenge. It's accountability. And it's long overdue. Mom nodded slowly, her tears falling freely now. Ethan's hands fidgeted with the edge of the table. Amber looked down, speechless. Dad, finally, seemed smaller than I had ever seen him, his arrogance stripped away by the undeniable truth. I handed Mom the folder, making sure she understood the responsibility she now carried. You can help fix this quietly, I said, or I'll be forced to involve the authorities. Either way, it will be done properly for Emma. No one moved. No one dared speak. And then, I did something I had never done before. I let myself breathe. Truly breathe. For the first time in years, the weight of constant worry lifted. The tension that had knotted my shoulders for months melted just slightly, replaced with calm and clarity. I looked at Emma, who had been quietly watching from her high chair, curious and why. Died? Mom is done, baby, I whispered. She smiled faintly, not fully understanding, but trusting, and that was enough. Later that night, I recorded my experience for her Retaliation. My narration was reflective, honest, raw. Some betrayals come from strangers. Others come from the people who claim to love you, who smile in your face while hiding their actions. The truth doesn't always feel like justice, but exposing it can be a kind of liberation. You can forgive, you can be kind, and you can still demand accountability. That's what real strength looks like. I smiled at the microphone, listening to the words echo in the quiet room. This is Lauren Hartley telling you our story, and this was our retaliation. By the next morning, the money had been transferred. Emma's medical trust was fully funded. Mom and Dad had acknowledged their failures and committed to correcting them. Ethan and Amber remained shocked, subdued, realizing for the first time that privilege and entitlement cannot shield you from truth. The house was quiet. The storm had passed, and in that quiet, I felt the most profound peace. Not vengeance, not humiliation, just restoration, the calm after long, justified anger. I tucked Emma in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, we made it through, and nothing, no lies, no money, no betrayal will ever take you from me. I sat in the living room long after she slept, reflecting on everything. Sometimes the strongest justice is not shouted or forced, but planned, executed with patience, and completed with dignity. I had given my family the chance to acknowledge the truth. I had given Emma the life she deserved, and I had given myself the strength I had never realized I possessed. Her retaliation wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity, about fairness, about protecting what truly mattered. And in that moment, I understood some battles are quiet, some victories invisible, but the peace that follows is everything.